have the pleasure to introduce Claudio Farias from a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Sport at the University of Porto, and a research member in the Center of Research, Education, Innovation, and Intervention in Sport. Well, that's an interesting conversation I'd like to have with you. He lectures on in all programs, a doctoral program, master's, sports training, and bachelor's in sports science. He has conducted research in sport pedagogy and sport coaching, and sees himself as a physical educator and teacher educator and coach educator, with a principal focus on student-centered, model-based practice. Without further ado, Claudio, thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Hope it works. I think it will. Can I just confirm all is right?
I see it.
Great, thank you. So, hello everyone. I am very pleased to be here. I am very honored by the invitation that was made. So it has been a great day, and I hope you are all enjoying this celebratory teaching TGfU anniversary. So I know I am. So, and I'm pretty sure that you are also. So I think it feels right, my presentation today, because it connects very well with some of those concerns that were mentioned before, either by Linda and by David Gutierrez. So about this learner appreciation concept, and this holistic view that we can promote through game-based approach. And this notion of situational learning, which pretty much making the experience of learning games personally meaningful to students. I think this is the big goal here. So this is titled Keeping Pace with the Ever-Evolving Educational Demands Posed to Physical Education. So I'll try to talk about expanding the pedagogical breadth of game-based approach. So in this sense, so pretty much I think I will try to shed light on how we can do it. So we have talked a lot about including these social goals more coherently, more explicitly in the game-based approach to connect them, how to develop this kind of overall holistic outcomes. So I'll try to show you how we can do it, at least from this proposal. So the outline will include a brief introduction to revisit the purpose of physical education in the wider expectations that society poses to schools and human education. I move on with making an argument for an expanded educational view of game-based approach, exploring the pedagogical implications of such perspective, and finally a very brief concluding notes. Well, and before any discussion about any given pedagogical model for teaching physical education, we need to clarify what are the contemporary educational requirements that the society poses to physical education, and consequently to physical education teachers and learners. This idea is stressed by several authors of reference in our field, such as Judith Rink, or those that have departed, those beloved ones, very missed ones, that are, for example, Len Almond, Daryl Sidentop, and our dearly missed Joy Butler. So in this last case, Joy Butler reinforced the idea that all pedagogical action is loaded with personal or institutional constructions of what and how students should learn, and about the realization of the education role of PE in society. Well, in fact, the eclectic character and focus on multidimensional and on the integrated development of the learner is commonly and strongly present in the different PE curricula all over the world, in several cases under the banner of motor or sport literacy development. Well, overall, you can say that this eclectic perspective aspires to the empowerment, responsibility, and autonomy of the learner through learner's development of collaborative problem-solving skills, lifelong learning skills, self-regulation, and inclusive citizenship or creativity and critical thinking. Currently, we can say with a high degree of empirical evidence that curricula and PE classes based on the implementation of model-based in a complementary way are well positioned to significantly impact on the achievement of various educational outcomes, typically encapsulated here in the psychomotor, social, cognitive, or emotional domains. Pedagogical models such as cooperative learning tend to be more geared towards the promotion of social skills, while sport education improves sports literacy and motivation of learners. And game-based approach have a strong impact on the psychomotor and cognitive development outcomes. Several student-centered game-based approach such as TGfU or the tactical games model in PE or the game sense mainly in the coaching setting are arguably some of the most implemented models in student-centered curriculum. Nevertheless, I am making the case here today that it may be possible to develop in PE students a large part of the multidimensional outcomes I mentioned above, placing not only the learner at the center of the process, but also game-based learning activities as a central avenue to develop these outcomes. For this, we need to define how we can expand the pedagogical scope of game-based approaches by including in their content-developed dynamics those core pedagogies such as peer teaching, student-led activities, and a focus on developing positive attitudes of social justice and equity toward others. The most obvious way to operationalize this idea is to use existing hybrid approaches. However, I must warn that, and the research team to which I belong has carried out extensive research on this topic. There is no hybrid model per se, composed, for example, by tactical game models and sport education or even cooperative learning. Yes, we have hybridized teaching units, mostly built ad hoc for these studies, but which do not have a solid instructional systematization. For example, if learners are to teach their peers or build their games, what content should they do it in, or when should the teacher lead this process, or the students, and when does it shift? Another possible way would be to blend those pedagogies that engage more actively learners in their learning experience in the content development structure of some game-based approaches that already have some built-in components favorable to this. For example, in the tactical decision learning model, you can use the debate of ideas and peer observation and assessment moments to work on skills such as creating games and solutions to tactical problems. Or, in the tactical games models, include students more actively in processes typically directed by the teacher, for example, problem identification and questioning. In the evasion games competence model applied mostly in Portugal, the strong games and problem-solving based focus is complemented with learners' engagement in some role-playing, refereeing, and peer coaching. Well, another viable possibility might be the hosting by this game-based approach of a more learner-oriented perspective. In this case, the learner-oriented framework offers very clear instructional strategies on how a teacher or coach can effectively engage learners more actively in the mediation of equitable and social just interactions, or transfer decision-making power to learners, and still ensure fundamental learnings that PE is supposed to develop, motor skills and all the others. In essence, we responded by uncovering a set of practical pedagogical strategies that show how teachers and coaches can effectively play the role of facilitator in many of the pedagogical interactions that typically occur in student-centered PE. The complexity of which many practitioners, I would say perhaps even scholars, have long been overlooking or oversimplifying as a guide on the side approach. We therefore base this proposal on a body of extensive empirical evidence built up over the last 15 years or so on topics that vary from PETE to motor acquisition on the long-term development of sport learners. And this has been mentioned before when David spoke that we should interface with other science scientific disciplines to strengthen our theoretical and practical basis of game-based approaches. In this case, or in short, foundational premises of student-centered learning at the center and teaching are revisited in light of new knowledge arising from interface areas of sport pedagogy, from dynamic ecologies, Ring's theory of instruction, or the meaningful complexity or creativity theories. In this perspective, an expanded view of game-based approach from a learner-oriented perspective will have the ultimate educational goal to promote the maximum motor, cognitive, and social emotional development in learners through their maximal active participation in the very instructional social interaction and processes that influence their sport development. Well, this educational aspiration requires, for example, the reconfiguration of typical teacher-student interactions. In the role of active facilitator, the teacher or coach maintains the intervention aim at the class as a whole or to small groups of students, but also must actively mediate the collaborative resolution of game problems between students, and here, the biggest difference has to also mediate the active intervention of the learners themselves in the peer teaching roles or mediating social attitudes among peers. In game-based approaches, in particular, the learner-oriented focus implies the reshaping of typical teacher-student instructional interactions. In this example of content development in tactical games models, it would be necessary to share instructional tasks between the teacher and the student, with a progressive increase in the responsibility for decision-making on the part of students. Specifically in session 1 below, after the teacher task presentation of game 1 to the whole class, with the consequent sharing of feedback between the teacher and students, the student leaders, for example, and the monitoring of the other students' performance, Game 1 Plus on the right side would follow students' leadership in the reintroduction of the game to their peers. In session 2, above, for example, by similarly modifying games 2 and 4, the teacher allows students to introduce a task in here because they would know already beforehand the structure of those games. And they could even draw on prior tasks like game 2 here as a warm-up task, which students can manage by themselves because they can transfer knowledge on that task from the previous session. On the other hand, possibly the most critical pedagogical implications is the need to constitute an instructional knowledge structure that establishes pedagogical coherence all throughout. This is achievable if one places the concept of scaffolding into practice as temporary pedagogical structures used to sustain students' growing autonomy in social and instructional process along each learner's zone of proximal development, as coined by Vygotsky or Woods. This instructional knowledge structure includes a mediation perspective of social interactions and regards the development of social skills and a healthy sense of embodied self as students progress in their ability to actively participate in the preservation and construction of more democratic learning contexts, equitable and more tolerant towards others. Ranging from the scaffolding of positive social interactions through structural-based scaffolding or the scaffolding of learner-mediated social interactions, and also from an instructional point of view, it includes the definition of scaffolding intentions, means, and settings and operations. It would be impossible to discuss each of these elements in detail in this presentation, but
Claudio, I don't think your speaker's on yet. We're probably missing the good part. Are you on?
was this?
Linda,
We're
I
having a
thought my
quiz
earphones had
now.
gone down.
We don't know what you said. We just start from here. We lost a couple seconds. So go ahead.
Okay.
Somehow
Oh, but you didn't lose
went
the
on
whole
mute.
thing, did you?
Yeah. No, we didn't. No.
Ah, okay. Okay, so starting from here, sorry, thank you. Well, as Joy Butler in 2006 asserted in her curriculum construction of ability, teachers must explicitly plan and integrate in their lessons explicit contents for the development of social skills among young people. Simple, unregulated participating in games will not spontaneously develop these skills and social awareness. The scaffolding of positive social interactions can be carried out inside the game in settings similar to the debate of ideas advocated, for example, in the tactical decision learning model. This would be shaped in group discussions that intertwine the exploration of the tactical possibilities and occurrences of the game with the deconstruction of stereotyped interaction that, for example, assign lower social status to students of lower ability, especially girls. In this situation, which we termed here as a social-oriented group discussion, the teacher guides the students towards understanding they have made unfair and uninformed judgments as to the origin of this game problem. Mike was said to make a bad passing when he he was strongly influenced by the poor quality of the support movement from his teammate. In this debate, the discovery of the game about what, when, what, and risk to do is linked to the deconstruction of biased social perceptions of students' competence. To develop these social skills, teachers or coaches can use the structure of the games to promote a more equitable participation of students in the PE activities. Games can be modified while aligning, for example, with the system of participation rotations and the group formation of learning teams, promoting equitable task rotation participation. Well, in this case, it's a 3v3 game. We have teams of 4 members, and then this allows, if we set the game duration accordingly, for example, 8 minutes of gameplay, this allows all players to play equally 6 minutes, as we can see in this schedule. Having an outside learner in rotation allows the learner to encourage her teammates or provide them with feedback, which reinforces social and affective bonds between students. When a student provides a peer feedback, a feedback to a peer, to a mate, well, it also has implicit caring and concern for that person, well-being and competence improvement. Modifications and adaptation can also be made in reference to inclusive manipulations of task conditions. For example, regarding scoring systems that value everybody gets the ball before shooting and scores triple gameplay. So, for example, this needs, of course, to be handled in a balanced way, this kind of pass to a specific player rules, so that it doesn't negate the very essence of the game. But it could be a first step, for example, of students, of a group of students starting to learn this process of becoming self-determined in their inclusive behaviors. So at the early stage of that development, we could steer more this process. Or using the typical safety cold pressure caught spots to afford more time for students with lower ability to have more time to think the game over and execute. Or implementing individualized game demands by leveling opponents. For example, A1 and D1 are higher skilled students, and A3 and D3 are lower skilled students. And they have different facilitating rules that vary between their direct opponents enacting either cold, warm, or hot defense. So as learners progress in their ability, those facilitated rules can be faded or even removed. Okay, so we can include players, and this is valid also for basketball or any other sport. We can include students with different ability level within the same game and in a game that poses different demands to them that are at the level of their real possibilities. On a more sophisticated and ambitious level of scaffolding learners' social development, we admit, learners themselves can be actively engaged in the process of actively mediating the social interactions occurring among their teammates. It is about involving young people as agents of change of potential stereotyped and discriminatory perceptions and attitudes. As youngsters speak a common language, and it is easier to get each other, to understand each other. Here, the teacher or coach needs to plan their pedagogical action toward training students as mediators for this role. For example, by selecting topics or steer these students toward interventions focused on some problems that occur during the team's gameplay practice. helping them to identify opportunities to provide positive feedback or to act as facilitators in establishing social bonds between teammates that didn't get along. Those teammates that didn't get along are two possible topics. For example, so there is a specific mediation by the teacher of students' mediation of their peers' interactions. And so the teacher bridges and focus attention on possible, for example, how identifying opportunities for bridging poor social bonds, or to even teach their mates, their peers, how self-regulation strategies, for example. In addition, another avenue to expand the scope of the educational outcomes promotion through game-based approach will be the scaffolding of students' more active involvement in decision-making and participation in instructional processes that impact on learners' motor learning and on the other multiple outcomes. We can, for example, frame this in reference to three core didactic or teaching domains, which is the planning, so designing tasks, the implementation, so the task presentation, and the assessment that can be peer feedback or even a formal peer assessment, formative assessment. The scaffolding means, on the other hand, range from the full demonstration of the game content we want to teach to setting out more implicit modification to the task that implicitly guide learners toward finding out the tactical solutions to that game. These tell us the exact instructional tool to use in each teaching episode. Typically, the lowest the explicit information on the back, the left-hand side, the lowest the explicit information provided to learners, the highest their cognitive engagement in that task content. In addition, the setting and operations explain where and how exactly in the lesson can we operationalize the pedagogical support provided to learners toward their self-regulated performance and toward their increased responsibility in participation and leading several instructional processes related with task presentation, task design, or task assessment. This can include guided practice, guided task organization, guided task presentation, pre-post test, session briefings, or group discussions. Here, I have time to leave the example of one of these settings and operations, namely the guided task design. It is unrealistic to expect learners to be able to design appropriate tactical solutions and respective tactical tasks without proper training for this purpose. In pre-lesson peer coaching seminars, for example, we can work before class on the tasks that the peer leaders groups intends to present to their teammates or to the whole class in that lesson. This pedagogical moment serves to guide learners in understanding how the modifications and features of the game shape the tactical behaviors that emerge from the practice of that game, verifying if these are the tactical solutions and skills that they intend to work, and then plan or tweak it or change it or adjust it a bit in conformity. Well, to conclude, I show a possible structure that integrates a sequence of content development related to the tactical games model based on the progressive engagement of students in feedback and task presentation duties I have presented earlier. So the level of participation of the students in the respective instructional process can be supported, that is, scaffolded, through several settings and operations. Guided practice, over here, is employed in game one to explain the task to the whole class before each peer leader introduced the task in their own teams. In game 2, for example, guided observation helps the student leader to observe and identify their teammates' emergent tactical problems to set their following feedback provision. So instead of the teacher every single time stepping in to provide feedback to the whole group, we can mediate this. If we have a coach outside, momentarily outside, and we prompt she or he to identify the problems, and then he steps in or she steps in to intervene. The guided task presentation, for example, in game 3, as shown before, helps students prepare and tweak it a bit to expand the previous game into a slightly more sophisticated game. So with regard to the what's next messages for the future, and still drawing on the topic of this presentation, empirical and theoretical steps may be worth for further systematization of a learner-oriented game-based approach as an avenue to expand the pedagogical impact of existing game-based approaches. It comes without saying that this endeavor needs to account for the same old problems that we are still struggling to resolve on the dissemination and wider implementation of game-based approach in every school or club setting, investing in the education of a better human being through participation and learning of games and sport. So in this case, early in the day, David had made a very comprehensive proposal of ways of moving forward, not in terms of research, in terms of pedagogies. So I would also ask or leave here this thought: would an international task force help in this quest when groups of people interested in these problems could share their experience and tackle different of these problems in a collaborative way? So I hope you can visit us soon in Porto. This is our Faculty of Sport.
Nice.
So this is Porto, Ribeira. Let's see if we can arrange some kind of event there. And please feel free to drop me an email. And if we can receive you here, that is great. So I will now stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. I just appreciate the comprehensive nature that you've gone around and considered the scaffolding that needs to take place and the stages or a continuum of how one might think about that. Very thorough and thoughtful. So thank you. I'd like to open to questions at this point, folks. Anybody have a question for Claudio? I mean, that's a lot to comprehend, but it certainly was very interesting. I guess I have to get the book. Tim.
Thanks, Claudio. I really enjoyed that. I was screen capturing at times. One of the things I really liked was when I was in Linda's role and people would do workshops and people would say, well, that's not a TGfU approach. That, you know, it's always got to be practice game. And I would say, well, I think the person's trying to highlight a progression. Remember, it's a curriculum model. And I liked your diagram that showed the lesson starting with the practice session that would happen in the previous lesson to facilitate the initiating of the game plus. And I think that captured some of the essence of the model, because a lesson isn't a universal size. I mean, you've got a 35-minute lesson or 40-minute lesson, you might not get through a cycle, right? But the learners are going through that cycle. And I think that model captured for me that the essence of the curriculum model. It wasn't a lesson plan model, right? It all depends how long the lesson is. So thank you for that clarification in that picture.
Thank you.
That's lovely. I appreciate that, Tim. That's awesome. Anybody else?
I used to say when there are no questions, I either was very, very explicit or not explicit at all.
Well, it's that, and or like you're the last person to the door for everybody for
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But I see David has something he wanted to say. Did you have your hand up, David, or I just make that up?
Yeah. Well, I was just say more or less what Tim said. It's very nice to show in a simple way that TGfU model has not to be understood at a lesson plan, but like a cycle learning. And it's I think that kind of confusions make some of the barriers of the learners, the practitioners. They think they have to do all the things in the same lessons, so that's impossible. So they say, oh no, I can't do that. So when I revisit the TGfU model, I really like it. Sometimes trying to do it along the unit without being in a hurry. So sometimes you do like appreciation in several lessons and these kind of things. So it's several things to do it. So yeah, I think that's a very good clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed.
If there's time for one more either question or thought.
Yeah,
I'll
please do.
Great.
Karen, go ahead, right ahead.
Claudia, thank you so much. You gave me so much to think about. Again, I too was taking pictures of your of the screen. And one of the things I want to point out that I really appreciate about what you've just shared is the way that you've really given some clear tools as to how to involve the students in the coaching part. And in where the teacher would then work with the student coach so that you're not taking their voice away. I want to spend more time on the slide where you really dug into how you're going to approach the social interaction. And I appreciate the way that you gave examples about how students are communicating about the game. So it's really, to me, the power of that is we're not adding on social interaction. It is authentic and legitimate, and we're thinking about how do we communicate in a game in a way that those are the real skills that you need. Because ultimately, we want students to leave and be able to play games independently. And we also hope that we're changing the world with more inclusive or truly communicating with others and understanding them. So thank you very much. I'm going back to a lot of thinking, so I really appreciate it. You've made my day.
All right.
Great.
That's
Thank you
excellent.
so much. Thank you
Like
so
hearing
much.
that. That's awesome.
It means a lot coming from you folks, because I look up to you all. So great.
Well, I don't know if there's any formal ceremony but I don't know how much we planned that part. We'll leave it at Aspasia. She can ride the Greek flag for us. No, I'm just kidding. So I just want to say that this has been a journey of a year for us, and some doing these webinars, and all of you have been participating, and the richness of our community is shown today in this culminating event, as well as the pre-recorded sessions that I hope you have a chance to look at. And I couldn't be more proud to be associated and be the outgoing chair of this group, and to know that Joy's legacy lives. She created this, had the vision for it, and we are taking it to its next level, and she would be very proud of us. So thank you for the day. Anybody else on the committee who would like to say anything?
I think we need some music for the SIG. Like, so there's always a way of wrapping up with a bit of music. So I think that's something to think about. What's the music for? Maybe
we need a
Rebecca,
theme song.
what is the music that we need for
Yeah.
the SIG?
And
We'll
I think
have to do a group TikTok or something where.
And Rebecca is
Rebecca takes it
facilitating
for us.
our
You just
design of the choreography.
Right,
as a
you
mediator.
just have to become friends with her on Facebook, and she'll dance for you. I know, for sure. Awesome.
If I may add something,
Yeah,
not
absolutely do.
not in Greek. When I sometimes I recall meeting Joy Butler in Edinburgh, and it was I bought. She gave me that book that about the democratic playing fair. So for that moment, it was something that I said, okay, this is another teaching games for understanding book. But during the years, I found so much value in this, and I'm very proud of being among the group today and sharing all these moments, even if it is online, even if we don't have music. And I feel this atmosphere, this festive atmosphere from the first day that we have been organizing the conference. And I think that it has power, even if it is online, even if it is pressed within this time limit and these time zones. I think when we get out of the screen and we meet each other, we will have lots of things to do and lots of things already planned and research going on. It's great to be with all of you here, and I'm very glad and very proud. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else want to say anything? Really, this is open. David, no final words of wisdom? You won't have to stay up really late anymore and go to any advisory meetings, and we will miss you dearly. There we go. Rebecca's got the scoop going here now. All right, folks. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day, and here's to the next 40 years.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.